And I counted my money at least 3 times. I had exactly $25.47.
Wow.
Lots of his attitude, even under the worst of circumstances, I've always been positive. I avoid negative, don't even get close to me. Passion, whatever I do, I give it 120%. And then the last one that I had is work ethic. I work harder than anybody, even still today. And saying that I get up at 5:30 in the morning, I always make my bed, and I always think I'm late. And so, and since that time, from there on in, yes, I did build my mill and have a number of other companies, about 10 altogether, and I love it. But it's not about money; it's about dream, and then being active and giving back to communities is extremely important to me. That's what I do, and that's the most important part.
Welcome to the Bricks and Banks podcast, where real estate meets real wealth. Whether you're building from the ground up or stacking your paper to the ceiling, Steph breaks down property power plays and money moves you can act on. From first-time buyers to seasoned investors, this podcast is your blueprint for financial freedom through real estate, business, and investment. Subscribe now. It's time to build your future. This is Bricks and Banks with Steph.
Before we dive into the conversation, I want to let you know that this episode is a paid partnership with BetterHelp. You know what's interesting? We all have these patterns in our lives. The ways we react when we are stressed out, hurt, or disappointed. Maybe shutting people out or walking yourself into exhaustion. Or that voice in your head that says you're not good enough. For me, it's shutting people out. And here is the thing. We know that these patterns aren't helping us. We can see them clearly, but breaking them, that's a completely different story. I used to think I could just power through on my own, that time will heal everything, or I just needed to be stronger. But the truth is, some cycles are nearly impossible to break on your own. Not because you're weak, but because you're so close to see the full picture. That's why having outside support, real professional support, becomes a game changer. When you have someone who is trained to help you understand why these patterns exist and give you actual tools to help change them, everything shifts. You're not just surviving anymore, you're actually on your path to healing. That's why I'm partnering with BetterHelp today. BetterHelp is on a mission to make starting therapy easier. They will connect you with a credentialed therapist who was trained to listen to you and give you helpful, unbiased advice, ensuring confidentiality throughout the process. You just get to fill out a questionnaire and you'll be matched with a therapist as soon as possible. And if that's not the right fit, don't fret. You can easily switch therapists at any time at no extra cost. To get started, head on to betterhelp.com/bricks and banks. That is betterhelp.com/bricks and banks to get 10% off your very first month of therapy. I'll make sure to leave a link in the description so you can get right on. Breaking the cycle starts with one step, and this could be yours. Going to therapy is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength. BetterHelp makes therapy simple with 10% off your first month of therapy to help you get started. So what are you waiting for? Remember, you don't have to do this alone. A problem shared is a problem half solved. And we are live. Hey everyone, welcome to another amazing episode of the Bricks and Banks podcast. Today on the show, I have a truly remarkable guest. John A. Brink is the founder, president, and CEO of the Brink Group of Companies, where he has spent nearly 5 decades building one of North America's leading value-added wood products businesses. But John's story begins much earlier. Born in Nazi-occupied Holland during World War II, he survived the horrors of hunger, winter, and made childhood promise to one day move to Canada. And he's basically living out that dream because he's joining me all the way from Canada today, the land of heroes. With just $25.47 in his pockets, he fulfilled that dream and went on to create a diversified business empire. Beyond business, John is the author of 4 books and he's the host of On the Brink podcast. He's a philanthropist, an advocate for ADHD awareness, and at 48 years old, he still competes as one of the oldest nationally ranked bodybuilders in America. John, it's an absolute honor to have you here. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Stephanie. I'm delighted to be here from all the way on the other side of the world, from British Columbia to London, England.
Yes, we're repping London today.
Yeah.
John, you're wearing so many hats. And you have your own podcast, your thriving podcast On the Brink. So what's brought you on this platform and what do you want our listeners to take out of the session?
So it started with blogging probably 6-7 years ago, where I did blogging and I like interacting with individuals. And then that graduated slowly, probably 5 years ago or 6 years ago, to working with a local television station where we did interviews, people around the region. And then what happened to all of us? So we had COVID and that shut us down for about 2 years. We couldn't do that anymore. And so then I had an apartment here and then saying, well, maybe what we should do is let's do a studio ourselves. So then we did that. At least we could do still that. And then from there on in, as we did more and more people out of the region, then I just say maybe expand and put another studio in southern BC, maybe Vancouver or so. And then the more I watch television, the more I see in those days, 1, 2, 3, 4 different people from all over the world, all interacting together and saying, what we should do is go viral and then using television. And so we joined Potmatch that brings people from all around the world together to do podcasting. So we joined them for about 2.5, 3 years ago. And since the time, we've been very, very active on all kinds of different topics. As I said earlier, we approaching 1 million subscribers on YouTube. And then obviously I've done close to 500 podcasts where I'm hosting and probably 200, 250 where I'm a guest. And I love it. All different topics, all different parts of the world. One day I have somebody in the Philippines, next in Athens, Greece, and the next thing in the UK, as you are.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. And for someone your age, one would think that, oh, John, you should be resting. You should be retired by now. Why are you still in this active game? But it just goes to show you still have a lot of value to give and you're doing it. I titled this episode From War-Torn Holland to Building a Business Empire in Canada with John A. Brink. So, John, your story begins in Nazi-occupied Holland during the World War II. Can you take us back to those early childhood memories where what it was like for you surviving through the hunger, winter, and how these experiences shaped your view on resilience and survival?
Yes, a good question, Stephanie. I was born November the 1st, 1940 in northeastern Holland. It's in about 10 or 15 minutes from the border with Germany. So, and life was fantastic. My parents married when they were in 1938. Very quickly, they had a boy and then a girl the following year. And then my mother was pregnant with me in early 1940s. And so my dad worked in a lumber company and they rented a small house and they were happy. And then what happened, a dictator called Adolf Hitler decided that Poland should be part of Germany, invaded them, and the next one would be the rest of Europe, democratic Europe. And so my dad got, in April of 1940, he was called into the Dutch army. And the last they saw of him was just before the bombing of Rotterdam, because Hitler didn't feel they surrendered quick enough. And so they bombed Rotterdam, a big city for most people that may or may not know it in Holland. And so they destroyed the whole center and thousands of people died. And so that's the last point they saw my dad. And for 5 years, we would not know if he lived or died. And so it was my mom pregnant with me, two little kids, and all of a sudden everything changed. And so the first thing that I remember as 3.5 years old was the Allied forces bombing the German war infrastructure in northern Germany, northwestern Germany that touches on the North Sea, Bremen, Hamburg, Kiel, on and on and on, Bremerhaven, and all of that. And so we living 10 minutes away from the border, my mom would take us outside on the flat roof that we had is because she felt safer outside than inside. And in the air at 3.5 years, hundreds of planes day and night. And that is sound that I will even now never forget. So that's the first experience. The second one was that hunger in 1944. Hitler cut off all the food supply to Holland, and a lot of young kids died because of lack of food, or older people that were vulnerable died as well. And I remember that part. I can still feel, even now, 80 years later, or I can feel hunger and the feeling how it feels. And between my brother, my sister, myself, we would go every morning with gunny sacks into the railroad yard, take anything edible and burnable and take it to the house. And the reason that we did as kids, because they wouldn't shoot us, they'd boot us one, and we'd be back the following morning. The winter of 1944-45 was the coldest on record. And so and we had one little room heated in the house, barely had enough fuel to keep it hot. I can still feel the heat on the front and the cold on the back. And again, a lot of young people died because between no food and the cold. And so, and then the next thing that I remember is that in 1945, we got liberated by our city, and on April the 12th, 1945. And I remember that period. Things were rough before that because what had happened, for all the people that know, the Allied forces, the US, Britain, and Canada together landed in Normandy in the in June of 1940 and started pushing through at the cost of many, many lives that were lost in Normandy, but pushed through there through France. And the Canadians were going through France, north through Belgium to the west coast of Holland along the coastline, and pushed in the north over towards Germany and going through the province where I was born and lived then. And we saw far too much that we should not have seen. Dead bodies, people being shot, and again, the fear of being outside, people being dragged out of their houses because the German forces were at nothing left, virtually, very in panic, trying to get back to Germany. And they blew up all the bridges that to slow down the Allied forces, and in particular the Canadians behind them, so that they get back to Germany. And so we saw people being shot and killed. And I always remembered as a kid seeing this little wagon with bodies on it and legs standing out and arms, and it made such an impression. It always stayed with me. So subsequently, still today, I still have PTSD. I got counseling in my 50th year for the inner child, the fear of losing that one parent and the little boy inside, got counseling for that. And so the Canadians liberated us. April the 12th, 1945, made such an impression on me. In the mornings, we would go over about 50 feet away from us. It was a schoolyard. Every morning, we would go over there to the Canadians, and they would feed us bread with cheese and butter, and the cheese and the butter was bigger than the bread. And we called everybody Johnny. And so we didn't speak the language, but really we did, right? So, and so it made such an impression that I knew when I grew up, I would go to the land of my heroes, Canada. And that's now 60 years ago. So, and even now still, what I do here is I'm a presenter and a speaker and all of that kind of stuff. Is that on the week of the liberation on April the 11th, I usually speak at 3 or 4 schools, as many as I can during that week, to talk about what is the 2 minutes of silence all about? Why is it important, especially for younger people, to remember that how precious things are in North America and that have not seen war? Because for those, with all due respect, that believe that war, after the war is over, everything goes back to normal, that's not so. It may take generations before it goes back to the same. And I have an obligation to share that with young people in particular. So I speak at colleges and at high schools about 2 minutes of silence. Why it is so important to appreciate as to what you have and how things can change so quickly. So that's kind of one of the things that I do. And then, the other part, that when I came to Canada, academically, I was not a success story in Holland. I failed grade 3 and I failed grade 7 3 times. And then people said to my parents, what are you going to do with this guy? And some people suggested send him to the mentally challenged school. And they said, no, we're not going to do
Yeah.
that. And so then I knew that I was just as smart as the others, not smarter then, but just as smart. And so I was always positive. And the dream that I had, not only to go to Canada, but also to build my own lumber mill. And so I left Holland, and to prove to me that I could do it, started with virtually nothing, a
Yeah.
suitcase, 2 books, three sets of clothes. And then I knew I wanted to go to British Columbia. That's where all the timber is. So I flew into Montreal, took the train across Canada, 4 days, 5 nights. Oh my God, that is a long way. Anyway, when I came off
Wow.
the train in Vancouver, I went to the immigration office. I didn't speak language, didn't know anybody, didn't have a job. And fortunately, there was a German guy working there, and I could speak some German. I told him what I
Mm.
wanted to do. He said, go to Prince George. That's where they're building all the sawmills, and about 500 miles north, or 800 kilometers for my European friends. And so that's what I did. Came off the bus here, the Greyhound bus, from Vancouver to Prince George was about 14 hours in the bus. Anyway,
What?
when I came off the bus, yeah, when I came off the bus in Prince George, I had my suitcase, 2 sets of books, three books, and then two
Mm.
sets of clothes. And I counted my money at least 3 times. I had exactly $25.47.
Wow.
Lots of his attitude, even under the worst of circumstances, I've always been positive. I
Yeah.
avoid negative. Don't even get close to me. Passion,
Mm-hmm.
whatever I do, I give it 120%. And then the last one that I had is work
Work
ethic.
ethic.
I work harder than anybody, even still today. And saying that I get up at 5:30 in the morning, I always make my bed, and I always think I'm late.
Mm.
And since that time, from there on in, yes, I did build my mill and have a number of other companies, about 10 altogether, and I love it. But it's not about money; it's about dream, and then being active and giving back to communities is extremely important to me. That's what I do, and that's the most important part. Podcasting is part of that as to what I do, because it's the
Yeah.
new media that is
Exactly.
exploding globally, and sharing with others my experience, and hopefully it be helpful and inspiring to others in terms of, at 85, that does not mean that you're old. Everything is possible. and
Mm-hmm.
and then quality of life is the most important part. And so when show you one of my second last books is Living
Okay.
Young, Dying Old. That's a picture of me,
Wow.
actually.
Yeah,
I'm a
that's you. I see
bodybuilder.
it.
And so
How to
you
thrive in your mid 80s. This is phenomenal.
And so that's what I'm saying. It's all about quality of life. And
Mm.
competing, I competed in Northern BC, bodybuilding and physique, came in second and third in physique, did the same
Wow.
provincially, qualified there, became a national, and then the Arnolds, and now again, and then COVID came. And now again, I'm training for 2026 again to compete. Everything is possible, and
Okay.
can do is my operation. Attitude, passion, work ethic.
Work ethic. That is phenomenal. I feel like your life should be a movie. You need to just not just write books, you need to produce a movie at this point, because damn, like everything you've set out against all odds. See, you've you've thrived against all odds. The odds were basically stacked up against you as a child, having to face hunger, having to leave your land of birth into a total different country. You didn't even know the language you were speaking, and you had just $25.47 in your pocket, and you're thriving. And now you're not just thriving, you're giving back. And you didn't say, you've done your bit, it's time to rest. No, you're training for the next year. It's crazy. You should be in a movie right now. You should tell your story, let your story be on the screen, because you're basically living out the word resilience. It's not just physical resilience, it's mental resilience, it's financial resilience. And yeah, Canada is your home now for the past 60 years. When you landed on Canada, what did that moment feel for you? And how did that feel? What was going through your mind in the type of choices you made and how you just wanted to thrive in Canada?
When I sat in the train in Montreal on my way to Vancouver, I didn't have much money, obviously, and I couldn't read English, and all I ate is toasted bread, because that's the only thing that I could relate to, because I couldn't speak the
Oh,
language. And then I had a sense, in all fairness, I had a sense of anxiety, Stephanie. I knew the decision I had made was critical for me to prove to me that I was just as smart as anybody else. And I had a dream of building a lumber mill. And I wanted to start with nothing or near nothing. And that's what I did. But there was a sense of anxiety sometimes, but my dream never left me. I knew if I would not go back unless it was in a box or successful. A little bit radical. That's how strongly I felt about it. I knew if I worked hard, I would
yeah,
succeed.
exactly. And 10 years later, you founded the Brink Forest Products, which grew into North America's leading secondary wood manufacturing business. So what gave you the confidence to take that leap into entrepreneurship? Did you have anyone guiding you? Did you have like a coach at that time? And how were you able to handle the risks of business in that environment?
Yeah, very good question, Stephanie. I started with nothing really,
Exactly.
and so when I started Brink Forest Products, already I had been started in a lumber mill as a cleanup man, then a lumber pilot, and then it was in a year and a half I was a superintendent of the mill. And
Wow.
the key to me always was I was there 20 minutes before the shift started, and I always left until my work site was clean. And it was just a matter of time until people would recognize me. This guy is different. He is leadership material, but it took time. So I stayed the course, always worked hard. And then within 2 years, I had an opportunity to become a general manager and buy into a small lumber mill, but it was way up north. It was in the Yukon territory. And for all those people watching us in Europe and in the UK, is that they will know that the Yukon territory is next to Alaska. And it's, if I'm in Vancouver, close to the border with the US, it's 500 miles, 800 kilometers north. Another 800 kilometers further north is the border with the Yukon territory. And so it is a place where it snows in July and you don't know if it is late or early. And so I was there for 5 years. So lots of hard experience I learned there. And then when I came back to Prince George and started my first company, I made a business plan, meticulously made the case,
Okay.
needed $25,000 to start a lumber mill. That I rented a property and I got turned down by a lot of people. Why? Because I didn't have equity in it. So I wanted to have the bank lend me $25,000 to start. And there was one bank that where I focused on that encouraged me to make modifications to my business plan. I still have the business plan today that I made then in 1975. And I would go back to the bank and always making sure that I could show them what modifications I had made. I always remember that the fellow that was looking at my account, he said, okay, let me talk to the manager. And he was about four booths away from me. Or,
Okay.
and And so he said, okay, let me talk to John Weems. And that was the name of the banker. And
Yeah.
so as I was sitting there wondering what's going to happen next, all of a sudden I heard way in the distance, give him the money, give him the money. He
Give
did.
him the money.
And he was the start of Brink Forest Products, which now is and then became a key element. I have 4 silos in our corporate system. The one is lumber manufacturing. The second one is warehousing, distribution, and logistics. We're the largest warehousing company in northern British Columbia. The third one is real estate, residential, commercial, and industrial. We're probably the largest one there too. Other one is media. And the media, I'm a presenter, and then I'm working on my 6th book, and then obviously I'm very active in podcasting, and I
Podcasting.
intend to build a platform, hopefully in the next 3 to 4 months.
It's amazing. So, but what was your strategy for like putting together a team? Because yes, you got the money from the bank and you need to find help, and finding help that you can trust is very difficult these days. So
That
how were
is
you able to put together an elite team that helped you drive your vision into success?
So I had a plan as to I had to find a niche. I
Mm,
did. And I was lucky, because as I already told you, academically, I was not a success story in Holland. And I failed grade 3 and failed grade 7 three times then. And then they said, okay, that's enough. My dad knew a furniture maker. So, and they had a furniture factory. They sent me down there at 12 and a half years old. So, and that's where I worked for 2 years or 4 years, and then I was drafted into the Dutch Air Force for 2 years. It was mandatory then, and then worked again for a force company in Holland, the largest importer in Western Europe. And so that's all experience that became extremely valuable to me. And so the advantage that I had is my experience in Holland working with hands and understanding what industry was all about. The other thing that I did,
mm,
Stephanie, is that I would go to any presenter that had been successful in Holland as to what made them successful, what made them unique. And
okay.
I would buy books and read them. And so that part always was important. And the 3 books that you may say to me, so what kind of books did you take? Well, that will kind of show what was on my mind. I bought Management by Drucker in Dutch. Drucker is recognized in business as being extremely successful, advocating structures and all of those things critical to successful business. The other one was Logical Thinking in Dutch. And then the other one was the book about Canada. So, so that when I started, then I already had all that experience hands on in the lumber. And then when I became a cleanup man here working for a big mill, it was obvious that I was uniquely different. Then it becomes a
Mm,
question of when do you get recognized, especially when you don't speak the language. It didn't take long for me to become at least gradually able to have dialogue. Then you will be recognized. Soon as I had the opportunity of becoming recognized, it will happen. It may always take some time. And when they did, changed everything for me. Very quickly, I went to becoming a supervisor, to becoming a supervisor of the sawmill, to become a superintendent, to
superintendent.
somebody offering me ownership in a small little mill that brought me
Wow.
back here because I wanted to start my own company with 3 employees. $25,000 from the bank,
3 employees,
3 employees, all good
including
money.
yourself, or
Uh,
diff-
in addition to me,
in addition to you? Okay.
I would work 24/7 as long as I could stay physically awake. And so, but I had a niche that made me uniquely different from others, and I had experience immensely valuable.
Wow. That's that's amazing because you basically combined experience and combined active learning because you were learning from people that were already doing it and having success in it. And that's one thing I'd like to say because thing is the knowledge is out there. You just need to ask the right people. And asking the right people is you taking the first step and reaching out. Because no one would and people when you ask people, people would actually tell you, unless you have ulterior motive or you have a wrong mindset, that's when you might be limited. But once you have the right mindset and you have the right motives, people would basically share their story with you and you learn 1 or 2 things. So you basically absorbed all that information and you got the right team and you got to the stats. That's amazing.
And the critical part, Stephanie, is that
Yes.
finding your passion is critical.
Mm.
And so I do a lot of presenting to younger people in high school, colleges, university in some cases. And when
Yep.
I do presentations, a lot of times afterwards, I ask some of them as to what are you planning to do after you finish your studies here. And a lot of
Yes.
them say, I don't know. And then the other part is that, respectfully, that in the United States, they did a study. 75% of the people that work
Mm.
don't like the job. And
Mhm.
70% of the 75% are looking for another job. So that put me in a position where I wrote a book about that. And the book is Finding Your
Finding your
Passion,
passion,
Living
living
the
the
Dream.
dream.
And then the fair question would be say, okay, John, so you started working when you were 12 and a half, and
Mhm.
now you're 85. So after 73 years of working, are you living the dream, John? I say every single day. When I get up, I say, lucky, lucky me, living in Canada with all
Mm.
the opportunities through all the ups and downs along the way. I'm still living
Wow.
the dream.
That's amazing. And talking about young kids, because from a very young age you experience PTSD because of the wars and the hardships of the winter hunger that you faced. And I think that was one of the things that contributed to ADHD that you currently have. And you've openly spoke about living with ADHD your entire life. So how has living with ADHD influenced the way you think, the way you create and lead businesses? And what advice do you give to entrepreneurs that might see it as a barrier rather than a strength?
Good question, Stephanie.
Mm.
Is that for me, for a long time, I had the dream to go to Canada. I
Yeah.
had the dream to build my own mill, start over again. But the biggest challenge for me likely also was, who am I? Why am I different than all the others? You know, failing grade 3, failing grade 7 3 times. But the teacher would say, as they looked at tests that were being done, the grading system would be from a 1 to a 10, 1 being the worst, 10 being the highest, and they would read it off. Susan has a 9, and then Peter has an 8, and then Simon has only a 6, 6.5, and then John Brink, as usual, has a 0. And so it became a laugh in the school. And
Mm.
so but I lived in my own world and I knew, I didn't know why, but that I was just as smart as any of the others. It was usually something, and with all due respect to teachers, and they didn't know then any better than that, respectfully, is saying that uh, John likely will not amount to much. And he probably finds a job working with his hands because he just is not smart enough. And so, that kind of a thing. So then coming to Canada, starting from the bottom up, that's what I did. And then something happened to me that changed everything. And it was in January. And if I'm in my studio, I'm in the boardroom of one of my companies.
Mhm.
But in my studio, I have a book that I bought in January of 1997. The actual book I have there, Driven to Distraction. I don't know why I picked it up in the bookstore. I've no idea. Written by Dr. Halliwell, who
Driven
is
to distraction.
driven to distraction. And so he has written 18 books, 5 on
Mm.
distraction. He is ADHD and has dyslexia. So do I. But I had no idea until I looked at that book and I wrote. And so the book was about ADHD. And I said to myself, standing in that store, I still have the actual book. I said, oh my God, that's me. And so I wrote in the book in Dutch because I was implied that it's a mental disorder. And
Yeah.
so that now I finally know who I am. And so as I became more knowledgeable about it in the book and started Googling, and so then I was 57 years old when I got the
Mm.
book. And so then the more I looked at it, the more I looked at it, I conclude it's a superpower. And so I went to my doc, uh, when I was 62, 5 years later, because I'm still ashamed of it, because it was implied that it was a mental disorder. And so the doc is a personal friend and delivered our two daughters. And he said to me, "Hey, John, why are you here?" I said, "I think I got ADHD." And we looked at it, and I do. And so, so can you imagine this, Stephanie, from the time that I was 12 years old
Wow.
until I was 62 when I was diagnosed, 50 years, that I was wondering, who am I? And so, but it did not stop me from success, but it still made me wonder until I read that book that I had a better understanding of who I am. And that's why then as well, I felt that it is a superpower, but understanding it first and foremost where you are different is important. And that does not mean that you're better than anybody else, but that you have specialties that are likely different from others. And that's why it is so important now that publicly around the world, we start speaking about it, neurodiversity issues. And I believe that's important. And I have an obligation to share with others my experience. And I wrote a book about that, ADHD Unlocked, and very popular actually. And so, but it changed my life. It took, from the time from 85, 12 years, 73 years that I was wondering, who am I?
And now you know who you are.
But now I know who I am. But that does
Yeah.
not mean to say that I think I'm better than anybody else. No, to the contrary. But it means that I have qualities that are unique because of I'm successful, not in spite of, but because of ADHD and recognizing the difference. I always was good, even when I was a kid. I always was exceptionally good at numbers. And then the second one, I was a very, very good writer, but not a good reader. And that ends ADHD, dyslexia came into the picture.
And that's amazing because it just goes to show the type of person you are, despite the background of hardship, the background of setback you faced. You've turned it around, and now you know who you are. You're living out your purpose. A lot of people don't know who they are, and they're not living out that purpose. So that's one of the philosophies of this podcast. We want people focused. This is a real estate business and investment podcast, but we are trying to help people find out who they are, because not everyone will do a business. We can like to preach the word, go out there, do your own thing, but doing your own thing might not necessarily mean doing a business. It might be in helping somebody else achieve. That is your own thing. But you, like you rightly said, you need to know who you are. So you know that you're living out your purpose and you're doing it rightly. And going back to the business part of it, I know that running a business can be very stressful, can be draining. Can you share one of your hardest challenges you've faced as an entrepreneur? How you're able to overcome the setback in business?
I'm glad you asked me that
Yeah,
question.
you're laughing. I know you're laughing because you have like a ton of stories because you basically lived different
Almost
lifetimes.
not through all of it, including still now. As we are sitting here, I said the silos, lumber, warehousing, real estate, media, all of
Yes.
them, I'm going to double in size, no question in my mind about it, in the next 5 years. And then at the same time saying the things are tough, tough, tough along the way. They are. But what I have learned in my 73 years or in my 85 years, that any problem, stay the course, never give up, and then go forward. And then credibility is critically important in business and all the things that you do. And then the other part, very important to me, always has been, it's not about making a lot of money. That's not my priority, but be part of the community, give back to the community and all those things. And then I have an obligation because of ADHD and dyslexia that so many young people are struggling with this. I have an obligation to share with them, not how successful John is, but that I say, and some people may conclude I'm successful in spite of that. No, I'm successful because of that.
Nice. Age 84, you're not allowing us to breed. You're still bodybuilding and competing at the national level. You're not allowing the youngsters to shine at all. So what role has fitness and discipline played not only in your personal life, but also in sustaining your energy and mindset as a business leader?
Excellent. Yeah. So the and quality of life is critically important. So like at 85, that's what I look like today. And so, and knock
Yeah.
on wood, and obviously, but diet is very, very important. My wife, myself,
Mm,
we've been together for about 42 years, and she has always been, she is, conscientious about diet, and so, and so I do all the shopping pretty much, and
yeah.
believe it or not, and if I go to a grocery store, I stay on the outside inside the store because that's where all the greens are. I like to have organic, and then I don't go to the aisles because that's where the processed and super processed foods are. And if the letters are very small, if I don't know what is in it, we don't want it. And
Yeah.
I must admit that she's a vegetarian, and I was not quite as close as she was. Didn't listen as well, and then I had a case of diverticulitis that nearly killed me. It's a rupture of the colon. After I had an operation, the doc said, "You came this close." And that was already when I was 68 years old. And that at that point, I knew I had to change and start being
Mm,
much more active in terms of diet. And at the same time, going to the gym. I was one of the ones that did the same as a lot of other people do. At the end of the year, they say, I'm going to do this, that, and I'm going to buy a membership to the gym. And then 2 weeks later, they can find 100 reasons why they're too busy to go to the gym. But I didn't do that. I stayed the course and worked hard, and then diet, and the combination of all of that, even
mm,
to me now, 16 years later, extremely important. So diet to me is important. Mental activity is important. And then quality of life is important. And I go to the gym 4 times a week, working with a
wow.
trainer, and I work hard at the gym. Hence, this is me now. But it's not so much being a bodybuilder. I'm not suggesting anybody should. It was coincidental for me because
Mm,
after working out for 6 years, somebody came up and said, "Hey, John, have you ever thought about competing?" I said, "Me? Yeah." I said, "Okay,
wow.
well, me." And so that's what happened. So 16 years later. But so the message from me is
Mm,
that if you are older, that anytime I started late on becoming a vegetarian, being conscientious about diet, being active mentally, and then the other one going to the gym or at least exercise, because physical exercise, cardio, and some weight training extremely important to maintain your fitness. And if
mm,
you do, some people say, well, I don't want to be an Olympian, but no, it's not necessary. But at least go for a walk. Start with a half an hour with a partner or a friend, and then
yeah.
you stay the course, do some strength training. You can do it at home. You don't have to go to a gym. And once you do that, then they will say, "Hey, Stephanie or John, you look great. What are you doing?" And that will happen if you stay the course and you feel better.
Exactly. Basically, identifying what you want to do, what you want to achieve, doing it consistently, small steps, and staying the course, because there's no point doing it today and not doing it tomorrow. You need to be consistent because it's the little steps, the little effort that builds up. And being able to have that level of discipline, it would basically apply to other areas of your life in terms of your study, in terms of your work, in terms of your business. You're able to apply it because you see the power of consistency, the power of making small steps and achieving results.
Exactly. Yeah, Stephanie.
Yeah, let's talk about your books. You have like about 4 or 5 of them right now.
Yeah.
I know Living Young, Dying Old, ADHD Unlocked, and a host of others. At what point did you decide that, okay, I want to start writing my books and start telling my stories? What was that thing that sparked it for you?
Good question, Stephanie, because writing books is not easy,
No,
especially
it's
not
not.
for somebody like me. I grew
Mm,
up in northeastern Holland speaking dialect. It took me time to when was drafted into the Air Force, or into in my
mm,
case, it took me time to learn to speak High Dutch because I love speaking dialect. And I barely got that under control, and then I end up in Canada. I had to learn to speak English and become a writer. And this fell in grade 3 and grade 7. Book writing was not part of the dialogue then, especially not in English for me. So, but that then being said, I had
mm.
A lot of people say to me, probably more than 20 years before I started this, John, you have such an interesting life. You should write about it. And I
Yeah.
tried
You you have
hard.
written about it. I feel like I'm adding now. You need to do a movie. You need to like basically give us a movie of your life
I
because you've
like it.
lived.
Talk to
Yes.
some people in London and say,
Okay.
I met this guy and I'm now a friend of him. Stephanie and John, who are friends
Mm-hmm.
after this podcast. And I think you make have to make a movie of him.
True.
And
We need it.
so people suggested it, and then I started, I stopped, I started, I stopped. And then about 6, 7 years ago, if I don't do it now, it will not happen. And so
Mm.
that's when I started writing Against All
It's
Odds.
so odd.
It took me 80 years to live it, 20 years to think about it, 2.5 years to write it. And after I did
Wow.
that, then the next one that I had an obligation to do is ADHD Unlocked. And then the other one is
Nice.
saying, make choices in terms of your job because living or finding your passion,
Your
living your
passion and
dream
living
is
the dream.
critically important. And then the other one that I found is living young, dying old is important. And then the last one that I just wrote, and this one came out on July 1st, $1 billion communication skills, is that
Mhm.
it was number one at Amazon even before it came out, very
Wow.
popular. And then I'm working on another one that will come out, and it is about you can, not you
Yeah.
can, you
You
can.
can. Nice. So, how what would you say has been the most rewarding part of this journey of telling your stories and sharing your life through writing, through podcasting? What's the most rewarding part of this journey for you?
I know the response that I have had. I'm not bragging about my podcasts are
Hmm.
so popular. Having people support it and being close to a million subscribers is amazing. That we have had that much response and that I do podcasts uniquely different than most other people do. Most of my podcasts are about an hour, and then I release the podcast within 2 hours. And I release
Wow.
them unedited. And this is what it is. And that's what I've done with 450, approaching 500 podcasts where I'm the host. And then the same guesting. I enjoy doing guesting. I usually do 3 podcasts, 3 to 4 podcasts a week, and then hosting or being a guest on others, maybe 2 a week.
Okay.
Yeah, I like it all.
Yes. Nice.
And I really enjoy our discussion. Now, we didn't talk much about finance and all the other things. We need to do another one at some point, talk about finance.
Definitely. We need to do another one where you just basically break down the ins and outs of business and
I like it.
finance, raising money for your company and
I
also
like it.
what we'll speak after the session. So talking about philanthropy, because basically I just wanted to use this podcast to let people know about your life and what you're doing and saying that, oh, there's a John Brink out there and he's crushing it. Philanthropy has become a big part of your journey with
Yes.
your 1 million commitment to Trades and Technology Center at the College of New Caledonia. What does giving back mean to you at this stage of your life? And how do you want your legacy to impact future generations?
Yes, very good question, Stephanie. Is that to me, because of my background in Holland, likely giving back
Hmm.
to community or being part of community has always been important in our family. And so
Yeah,
for me, that became obvious, even at a time that I didn't have much money and was not well known. But always the feeling of being able to give back has always been important. And then the certain things that I feel very strongly about, obviously, is trades and trade training, education. I think we need to readjust the whole structure around training, starting as young people from kindergarten all the way up to university. I don't
yeah,
believe that we are as effective as we should and could be. And that topic to me is important. And then the other one that has had an immense impact on me is ADHD,
unlocked.
that are probably, I would suggest, 30% of the population globally are benefiting or affected from ADHD and dyslexia or some form of neurodiversity issues. And I have an obligation to speak about it in terms of that it is not a liability. Once you
Mm,
understand it, it can be a benefit and I have an obligation to share that with other people around the world.
This is amazing because you've lived that life. You've navigated the depths and the heights of it. You've come out of it successful, and you're teaching other people to replicate your success. So finally, John, you've accomplished so much, from surviving war to building businesses, writing books, and giving back. What excites you most about the future? I know you have the national competition coming next year that you're prepping for. What personal business goals are you still chasing today?
I'm always excited about sharing with young people in particular. So I look forward to November when I be speaking to 3 or 4 different schools, young people,
Oh,
sometimes up
nice.
to 1,000 kids, young people,
Wow.
talking about the 2 minutes of silence, why we should appreciate where we are, what we have, and the importance of family, and what the
Mhm.
war really meant, and all of that to me is important, that I have an obligation to do that. And the other one is that I love going to the gym. I love to do business, and there are challenges. Yes, there are, but obviously I've seen it all, done it all, and I like that. And to build a team around you, because you can't do it alone. That part is important. And then the other part, I was look forward to the weekend. We have a place in Victoria. So Friday afternoon,
Nice.
which is today here,
Yeah.
within the next 3 hours, I'm 2 hours, 2.5 hours, I'm flying to Victoria, North Saanich. We have 7 horses. We have an arena. We ride English dressage, my wife, myself, and I enjoy being there. It gives me the opportunity to reflect, work on
Mhm.
some of the projects, including writing books and other things, and just blend into the rest of the communities, to the community of retired people there. We're all a bunch of old people, and I like it that way. So, but once I get back to Prince George, I open the energy level, and I'm a go, go, go guy.
Nice. Let's go, go, go. Amazing. That brings us to the second part of the segment. So this is called the firecracker round. Drum roll. So this is just me asking you some questions and you hitting me right back with the very first answer that comes to mind. So I know you're an author and you love to read a lot of books because you've learned so much from books. What's one book you think every entrepreneur should read?
I would say Against All Odds, written by John Brink.
Definitely. Yes. All right. If you could go back and give your 25-year-old self one piece of advice, what would it be?
Stay the course, never give up.
It's never give up. Like, 'cause a lot of people get frustrated easily when things don't work out their way. So once you have you've built the discipline of consistency and keep showing up every day, you're gonna hit it. What's one daily habit that's contributed most to your success?
The most important part is physically stay fit. So I sleep usually 7 to 9 hours a night.
Nice.
The first thing that I do when I wake up, I drink 10 ounces of water. Then from there and then, I have 3 eggs and an avocado, or 4 eggs and an avocado. Then I usually go to the gym at 11 o'clock in the mornings. Then I have a double protein drink. And then in mid afternoon, another small protein drink, healthy one. And then have more solid food. And in the evening, and then again go through the same thing. And then the other one is I'm usually positive about things. Attitude, passion, work ethic, what follows
Yeah.
is success. Applies to everything that I do.
What does success mean to you today in one sentence?
Giving back.
I mean, John, you've basically broken every record. You've broken the barriers of what it means to come from a place of disadvantage, and you've spun things around and you're sharing your story. I really appreciate you coming on the pod today. But before we let you go, how can we reach you? What are your social media websites so we can all common. But I know that yes, we need to read your book. So also nice to have the Amazon book links so we can put it in the description.
So the best contact would be John, JOHN, as in Adam or Aaron, Brink, BRINK.com. That will show everything about us.
Wow, that's amazing. That's it. Thank you so much, John, for coming on the podcast today. It's been amazing having you.
Thanks, Stephanie. It was a privilege, and good luck to you, and stay in touch.
Nice. So there we have it, guys. We've had such an incredible conversation with John, from surviving the challenges of war to building a thriving business empire. John's story is a true reminder of power, resilience, discipline, and vision. Thank you for tuning in today. So we come again your way next week. Let's continue to turn knowledge into action and breaks into bank. See you in the next episode.